A harmless behavior? When you don't realize you're being controlled. We often hear that masturbation is completely normal, a physiological behavior, a way to release pressure, a natural part of being human. And that may be true until you can no longer stop. No one clearly tells you where the boundary lies between normal and addiction. You think that as long as you're not harming anyone, everything's fine. But here's the truth. Few are willing to face. Anything that's done too frequently, anything you have to hide, avoid, or feel out of control about it is no longer a harmless act. It's dependency. The greatest danger doesn't lie in the behavior itself. It lies in the unconsciousness. When you begin to do something over and over without choosing to, that is the moment you lose your inner freedom. And the scary part is, this process is silent. You don't feel it immediately, only when you realize you can't focus. You're easily irritated, you're drained, and you've lost your willpower. Does the cost become painfully clear? Stoicism doesn't ask you to suppress or feel ashamed, but it does pose a direct question. Are you still the one steering your mind? Or are you just reacting based on habits, instant pleasure, and the avoidance of fear? Some people use pleasure like a blanket to cover up their loneliness. Others see it as a reward after a tiring day. And some do it simply because they don't know what else to do, whatever the reason. If you don't observe yourself, you're being controlled by the very thing you believe you're in control of. The question isn't, should you stop? The question is, can you stop when you want to? If the answer is no, then that's no longer freedom, and that behavior, whatever it is silently controlling you. You might think, as long as it helps me sleep better and relax, what's the harm? But here's what you need to understand. Every form of comfort has its price. When you repeat a behavior to seek temporary peace, you're digging a hole each time you return. You need more to reach the same feeling. And with each time, you drift further from the ability to face reality with reason. The Stoics call this the moment of losing oneself, not because of wrongdoing, but because the mind is no longer present to choose. You're living by biological reflex rather than intention. And that brings consequences greater than you realize. When the brain stops thinking, you don't just lose your ability to analyze, you lose the chance to ask, what do I really need right now? A release or a clear direction? If you don't pause to reflect, you will continue drifting. And the further you drift, the more you forget where the shore even is. The dopamine loop. The more you seek, the emptier you become. Pleasure itself isn't the problem. The problem is when pleasure becomes the only thing that makes you feel okay about life. Every time you masturbate, your brain releases dopamine, a neurotransmitter that brings satisfaction, excitement, and relief. But what many don't realize is that dopamine doesn't just make you feel good. It also establishes a habit, a loop. When you do something that feels good, your brain remembers it and labels it as a behavior worth repeating. And so you repeat it. At first, it's once every few days, then daily, then even multiple times a day. But the feeling of satisfaction isn't what it used to be, because your brain has started to adapt. It becomes lazy to respond to the old amount of dopamine, like someone who drinks coffee every morning. At first, 1 cup is enough to feel alert, but later it takes 2, then 3. This is known as dopamine tolerance. The Stoics call this the state of being enslaved by desire, when you know something is harming you, but you still can't stop. When you think you're in control, but you're actually driven by pure biological reflex. You're no longer the master of your mind. You're just responding to chemical signals in your brain. And the problem is, you don't realize how far you've gone, because with each step you slide, Your brain redefines normal according to your new level of dependence until one day, what you once thought was too much becomes every day. And by then, you no longer realize you're in a downward spiral. Stoicism doesn't say pleasure is the enemy, but it emphasizes that if you're not mindful, the very thing that brings you joy can become your chains. And you won't know how long it'll take to truly feel free. If every time you feel down, you choose to escape instead of confront. The more you seek to feel full, the emptier you become. Because what you truly need isn't more dopamine. It's a clear reason to live, to rise above fleeting emotions, and to stop being deceived by your own body. When you lose control, desire becomes a chain around your mind. No one wants to admit they've lost control. We always believe, I can stop anytime I want. But try answering honestly. How many times have you said, this will be the last time, only to repeat it again? How many times have you woken up feeling empty after pleasure, only to repeat the same behavior the next day? When a behavior becomes a habit, and a habit turns into addiction, you are no longer the one choosing. You are being chosen by desire. Loss of control doesn't stop at how many times you do it per week. It spreads to other areas of life. You can no longer focus at work. You procrastinate. You feel drained, aimless worse. You start seeking more extreme stimulation, hardcore pornography, distorted fantasies, even toxic relationships. Just to satisfy your craving for pleasure, reason fades, strength weakens. And then, like an addict, you start lying to yourself. Just today, I'm too stressed. I still have control. But the truth is, you're living in an invisible cage. You locked yourself in a cage padded with comfort, covered in rational excuses, but gradually squeezing your will and your freedom. Stoicism does not condemn humans for having desire. Seneca once said, "We are not harmed by desire, but by our inability to control it." The issue isn't the behavior, it's that you no longer choose it consciously. You're being swept along by it. When you lose control, you lose self-respect. And when that respect is gone, you start allowing yourself to repeat. You live in a cycle: pleasure, guilt, surrender, the next pleasure. That's not freedom. That's the most subtle form of imprisonment, when you trap yourself in pleasurable acts, and in doing so, lose the strength to face what truly matters. If you don't stop and reclaim control, desire won't just dominate your mind, it will rewrite your entire lifestyle and the person you're becoming. And that is a price no one wants to pay. Stoic mindfulness. It's not about suppression, but self-understanding when it comes to desire and self-control. Many people automatically assume the solution is suppression, force, or elimination, but that is not the Stoic path. Stoicism does not teach you to fight emotions as if they are enemies. It teaches you to observe them like a demanding companion, one you cannot abandon, but it also need not obey. The mindfulness this philosophy speaks of is not a state of fleeing from desire, but the ability to engage with it lucidly. Epictetus once said, "It's not events that disturb you, but your judgment about them." Similarly, masturbation is not the root problem, it's how you respond to the internal urge. If you act unconsciously, simply to ease temporary feelings, then whatever the behavior is, it is controlling you. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor, a soldier, a philosopher, once wrote in his journal, "Always know what is happening in your mind. If you don't, you will be a slave to your emotions." And that is exactly what most of us lack: the ability to face our emotions without letting them dictate our actions. The Stoic does not avoid desire. They are not ashamed of human feelings, but they do not let feelings lead. They use reason to observe. They pause before reacting. They do not act from unconscious impulse. They choose actions aligned with their values. So the question isn't, do you have desire? The question is, Do you understand where that desire comes from? What part of you does it represent? And what do you want more than that? When you begin practicing mindfulness like a Stoic, you'll realize every emotion can become a teacher if you listen closely. And at that moment, you no longer need to flee from desire or suppress it. You just need to stand still long enough to see that it no longer has control over you. That is the first step to inner freedom, not winning against emotion, but becoming someone you trust, even when the inner storm begins to rise. Self-mastery. When you choose to live by reason, not reflex, there is a very small but crucial difference between someone who is self-mastered and someone who has given up. The latter lives by reflex, while the former lives by choice. You may still experience desire. You may still feel urges when stressed, lonely, or exhausted, but the difference lies here. Do you pause to observe it? Do you ask questions before acting? Or do you let instinct lead, responding without awareness? The Stoics do not deny instinct. They understand that we all have the animal part of us, the part that seeks comfort, avoids pain, craves pleasure, but they believe that human beings are given a gift greater than instinct, reason, the ability to discern what should be done and what should be avoided. Epictetus once taught his students, "True freedom is not doing whatever you want. It's knowing what is right and choosing that even when it's difficult." It may sound simple, but in reality, it requires daily training because desire always comes first. Reflex is faster than reason. You will always be tempted to release quickly. Reward yourself, just this once. But if you keep living by reflex, you'll never build a strong mind, and worse, you'll lose the ability to believe in yourself. Every time you choose reflex over conscious choice, you send yourself the message, "I'm not strong enough to do otherwise." Repeat that long enough, and you'll start to believe you're weak. Self-mastery is not about painful suppression or resistance. It's the ability to recognize emotion, face it, and act based on your values. That is how you protect your self-respect, your clarity, and your trust in yourself. A self-mastered person is someone who can stand in the midst of chaos without being swept away. Someone who still feels desire, but knows where to draw the line. Someone who chooses the harder path because it is right, not the easier one, just because it is pleasant. And when you live by reason instead of reflex, every small action becomes a silent declaration, "I am the master of myself." And that is the beginning of a power no one can ever take from you. When pleasure takes you far from your values, have you ever asked yourself, what truly brings you fulfillment? The moment of orgasm, or the feeling of living in alignment with what you believe? Pleasure brings comfort, but comfort does not equal happiness, and many have traded long-term peace for a few moments of temporary ease. Worse, they've lost their sense of direction without even realizing it. When you repeat a behavior just to feel better, you're using pleasure as a way to escape reality first. It's stress, then loneliness, then eventually the daily feeling of emptiness. You soothe yourself with dopamine, but the cost is drifting further away from yourself, from the values you once pursued, the ideals you once craved. A Stoic never lives without direction to them. A man of value is someone who doesn't let circumstances, desires, or fleeting emotions rewrite his path. Because every time you choose comfort over what is right, you abandon inner strength. Pleasure makes you forget what matters. But when pleasure repeats too often, it becomes dull, monotonous, meaningless. You no longer feel alive. You're merely trying to feel something, anything, to avoid the emptiness. Meanwhile, living by your values requires alertness, discipline, and the courage to face hardship. But it's also the only path that leads to a life of depth, dignity, and self-respect. When pleasure controls you, you'll do anything to avoid discomfort, dodge pain, seek ease. But when you return to your values, you'll willingly embrace challenges, say no when needed, and walk a path without needing applause. Ask yourself, who were you before getting caught in this loop? What did you once deeply long for in your heart? If you don't stop, pleasure will take you further away from those things. But if you are brave enough to stand still, to reflect, and to choose again, you can return, not to a life of asceticism, but to one of clarity, strength, and the inner freedom you truly deserve. A story of awakening. When you stop and look within, I once knew a man. He was not weak. On the contrary, he was intelligent, ambitious, once the pride of his friends. But there was one thing he never told anyone. He was addicted to masturbation. At first, it was just a way to relieve stress after work, after fights with his girlfriend. After those gloomy days with no clear reason, he saw it as a quick, pleasant way to unwind. But over time, it was no longer a choice. It became a reflex. He found himself waking up later, losing focus at work, avoiding real relationships. His energy gradually drained, and he didn't know why. Worse, he began to lose faith in himself. Am I really that useless? Do I not have the strength to stop? Everything began to change when he discovered Stoicism not as therapy, but as a way of life. He started reading Marcus Aurelius's journal, took daily notes like Seneca, asked himself, like Epictetus once taught, am I doing what is worthy of me? Nothing changed overnight, but the first thing he managed to do was stop and look at himself. No more running, no more excuses, just the courage to face the truth that he was being controlled by a weaker part within. He began changing bit by bit, woke up 30 minutes earlier each day just to write. Every time an urge arose, he didn't react right away. He simply sat, breathed, and observed. He didn't judge himself, but he didn't justify either. The first month was hard, the second, a little easier. By the third, he realized the feeling of freedom didn't come from defeating desire. It came from knowing he could choose differently, and had done so. Now, he lives a different life, not because he's perfect, but because he no longer runs from himself. He can face the deepest emotions, loneliness, fear, insecurity, without needing pleasure to mask them. This story isn't to glorify anyone, but to remind you, you are not alone, and you are not weak. You only need a single moment to stop, to look within, and to begin again, not with brute force, but with mindfulness, the very thing that creates a person who cannot be conquered from within. Living by values. When you place inner strength above instant pleasure, there's something peculiar about the journey of inner growth. The more mindfully you live, the more you realize that the things bringing you the deepest peace are not found in the most intense sensations. Pleasure comes easily and fades quickly, but the quiet pride you feel when doing the right thing, the inner peace from keeping your discipline, the self-respect gained from resisting temptation, those are the real rewards. And strangely, they make no noise. When you live by pleasure, you are always racing against yourself. Every day demands a new dose of stimulation, a stronger form of release, a more intense thrill. But the more you chase, the more dependent you become. You can't stop without feeling empty. You can't sit still without feeling a lack. In contrast, when you live by your values, you live slower, but deeper. You know who you want to become, and you choose your actions based on that, not based on fleeting feelings. You may still feel desire, but you don't need to submit to it in order to feel complete. Stoics always emphasize inner strength, something that comes from discipline, clarity of thought, and acting in alignment with your life principles. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is when you are no longer pulled by what you cannot control." That's not just self-control, it's inner calm, the kind that comes when you do what's right, even when no one is watching. You don't have to be perfect, but you need to be honest with yourself. Every time you choose to live by your values, instead of chasing instant satisfaction, you lay a brick for a solid inner home day by day that turns you into a different person, calmer, deeper, and harder to shake by shallow things. Pleasure might make you smile for a moment, but living by your values will keep you grounded for a lifetime. In the end, you'll have to choose a life that chases emotions but feels constantly restless, or a life built on values where you always know where you're heading. Only when you place inner strength above fleeting pleasure can you truly walk as a free person, not dependent, not led by urges, just you and the path you've chosen. Observing emotions, mastery comes not from suppression, but from recognition. One of the most common mistakes in facing desire is trying to suppress it. Many people, when beginning their path to change, force themselves to think differently, to stop feeling, to shut off all emotion. But emotions don't disappear just because you try to deny them. On the contrary, the more you suppress, the more they simmer and wait for the right moment to explode. Stoics do not try to eliminate emotions. They learn to observe them mindfully, gently, but decisively. When a desire arises, you don't need to act on it immediately. You just need to pause for a beat, look it in the eye, name it, and ask, where is this feeling coming from? Is it truly necessary? Does it align with the person I want to become? Seneca once wrote, "We are slaves to what we do not understand." And it's true when you don't understand what you're feeling. You react by instinct. You act to escape discomfort, instead of transforming it through awareness. Imagine, every time the urge appears, instead of avoiding or indulging it, you just sit and breathe. Observe the emotion pass like a cloud. No attachment, no identification. You'll see something strange happen. That emotion will dissolve on its own if you don't react. This is not coldness. It's full presence. When you are clear enough to recognize emotion, it no longer controls you. And when it doesn't control you, you can act from reason, from your values, from the highest self within you. Make a habit of journaling every day. When you feel the urge rising, don't react right. Ask yourself, what am I feeling? Where is this feeling really coming from? What is it urging me to do? And do I truly want that? These simple questions are powerful enough to help you reclaim inner control instead of becoming a victim of biological reflex. No one is stronger than the one who can sit with their emotions without being swept away. No one is freer than the one who can observe themselves, then choose what is right, even if it's not pleasant. And that is how you gradually become the person you trust the most. Not reacting, but responding. Not avoiding, but facing. Not suppressing, but understanding to rise beyond. A daily decision. Freedom is the ability to choose what's hard, but right freedom is not doing whatever you want, whenever you want. That's an illusion, a subtle trap disguised as personal liberty. True freedom only exists when you can choose what is right, even when it is the hardest thing to do. Every day, you face countless small decisions. It might be a late-night moment when the urge returns. Your body whispers that it needs release. Your mind tries to convince you, just this once. Emotions pull you along, but right then, you have a choice to be dragged by instinct or to rise and hold your ground. No one can help you in that moment. No one sees it. No one is judging. No one is cheering if you succeed. Just you facing yourself. And that is the moment that shapes the person you are becoming. Stoicism teaches that every action is an expression of the person you want to become. Every time you choose values over pleasure, you carve into your inner being a message. I am someone who knows what is right. I am someone who can control myself. I don't live as a victim of emotion. Don't wait until you're strong enough to start changing. True strength is built by doing what's hard bit by bit every day. Every time you say no to old habits, you rebuild your trust in yourself. Every time you choose to write, meditate, or step out of the room instead of giving in, you lay a stone for the foundation of your inner freedom. Every time you choose what's hard but right, you become a deeper, steadier, more honorable version of yourself. Change does not come from one big breakthrough. It comes from quiet, repeated decisions no one sees. And then one day, you'll realize you no longer have to fight because you've become someone that small temptations can no longer move. Because you are truly free, not from desire, but from dependence on it. Freedom begins within, from the courage to choose what's right, again and again, without needing a grand reason. Just one powerful question to guide you today. Do I want to live as a victim or as the true master of my own life?